You're watching a Highwire Media podcast. Welcome to the Dead Reckoning podcast. I'm your host, as always, Larry Leese. Today, we continue uncovering history's darkest truths. This week, we dive into the Isdal woman, one of Europe's most infamous unsolved cases. And with that, let's dive right in. It's 1970. The Cold War is silently raging. The Middle East is still reeling from Black September, and in Isdalen, a remote valley in Bergen, Norway, tucked between some boulders, an unknown woman lies dead. The Isdalen Valley, or Ice Valley, has another name, perhaps more apt considering its legacy: Death Valley. For over 50 years, the case of the Isdal woman has haunted not only the initial investigators, but all those following in their footsteps. Despite intense investigations, we're no closer to answering any questions posed by this enigmatic case. Who was this mysterious woman? How did she end up dead in a cold, isolated valley? Why did no one ever come forward to claim her body or help solve the mystery of her death? Was there no one who missed her? No one who was noticing she was gone? Or was the reason for her death covered up by a government unwilling to admit their role in international espionage? Today, listener and viewer, we're going to present the case of the Isdal woman, and just maybe one of you will spot a connection that everyone else has missed. A little thread that, when pulled, will unravel the entire mystery and finally answer the elusive question of who was the Isdal woman? Okay, no pressure, audience. You're just going to solve the mystery that has plagued researchers, hopefully in the next hour. I mean, probably not, right? But before we do that, we'd like to take a time to highlight our sponsor this week, and that is NordVPN. Looking to protect your privacy online without breaking the bank? Now's the perfect time to lock it in, because NordVPN is offering their best deal yet. Right now, you can get up to 77% off plus 3 extra months free when you grab a 2-year plan. With NordVPN, you can browse securely on public Wi-Fi, block trackers, and stream content from anywhere in the world without restrictions. Their lightning-fast servers means no buffering, no lag, just safe private internet at home or on the go. And setup is incredibly simple. Download the app, click Quick Connect, and you're protected in seconds. Plus, with Nord's strict no logs policy, your online activity stays your business. So don't wait. This exclusive deal won't last forever. Use the link in the description to get up to 77% off plus 3 extra months free with a 2-year plan. NordVPN. Protect your connection, unlock your world. And now, back to today's video. A body is discovered on November 29, 1970. Young girls ages 10 and 12 were out with their father enjoying a Sunday morning hike, exploring the valley. What should have been an enjoyable family outing came to an abrupt end when the 2 girls stumbled across the severely burnt remains of a woman. Those kids are definitely going to need therapy. With the horrific image burned in their memories forever, the children and their father had to make their way down the mountain to find help. These were the days before cell phones, nor would they have helped them much. Cell service is still unreliable in the area, even today. The 2 girls who found the body have never spoken to the media, which is not surprising. It must have been an extremely traumatic experience. Nowadays, you'd be fine though, right? The 2 girls who found the body have never spoken. Excuse me. Yeah, I'd just be like, I just want to go on with my life and not relive that and then get hassled by like crime shows, crime podcasts forever. Even 50 years after the body was discovered, one of the last surviving members of the original police party that ventured into the icy valley recalled climbing a steep, sometimes impossible slope and the scent of burnt flesh. When they finally reached the scene where the unknown woman was waiting, it wasn't a pretty sight. She was lying on her back, her arms stretched out in front of her in what is known as a boxer's position. Her throat was so badly burnt it was impossible to make out any facial features. All the police knew at this stage was that she had medium-length hair tied up in a ponytail with a blue and white printed ribbon. Various items probably belonging to the victim were found strewn around her. Police recovered clothing, an umbrella, 2 melted plastic bottles, half a bottle of liqueur, and a plastic cover that probably held a passport at one time, but unfortunately no longer contained any form of identification. A fur hat was also found underneath the body. All the labels had been cut from her clothes, and a wristwatch was lying next to her that had stopped at 10:10. Is this when she died? 10:10 is a standard setting for watches in shop windows, so it's possible that the watch had never actually been used. The police also found jewelry, but strangely, the woman wasn't wearing any of it. Instead, the jewelry was placed next to her. Speaking with the BBC many years later, forensic investigator Tormod Bones recalled that the way the items were placed almost looked like some kind of ceremony had taken place. I'm also thinking, okay, if the jewelry was separate, was she wearing the watch? The wristwatch was lying next to her, so was the jewelry, which makes me think like the wristwatch probably came from where the jewelry came from, like the same shop. And the wristwatch is going to be 10:10 because that's the standard position for watches. Considering only that the front of the woman was burned, those at the scene considered that her death might have been an accident. Perhaps she fell forwards into the fire, then lunged backward in a panic, stumbled, and fell down. Others thought that perhaps the woman had made her way to the icy valley to commit suicide. Couple of problems there. How many times have you fallen into a fire? The number of times I've made fires while camping, countless. Number of times I've even gotten like slightly burned from a fire, none. Sure, like ow, then you take your hand away, you touch something too hot. But actually getting like anything beyond that, something that needs like a plaster or a band-aid, it's like zero. Who falls forward into a fire? Others thought that perhaps the woman made her way to the icy valley to commit suicide. Oh, and with that, who chooses to like commit suicide? Like, I get that people do the self-immolation where like they protest something, so they set themselves on fire in front of like an embassy or something to protest what's something that's happening. But like to choose to do that in like isolation as a way of killing yourself is insane. A few considered the possibility that she'd been murdered and even wondered if the murderer was still somewhere close by, admiring his handiwork and reveling in the horror on the faces of those discovering his crime. If the scene of the woman's death wasn't puzzling enough, the ensuing investigation would uncover a case that even today has more questions than answers. It's weird that all the tags were cut out of her clothing, and that feels very spyish, doesn't it? An investigation into the death and identity of the woman found in the Isdal Valley got underway immediately under lead investigator Oscar. I'm not even going to try to pronounce their last name. Initially, the police considered that the woman's death was an accident or suicide. Karos, one of the first men at the scene, mentioned the remains of what could have been a campfire. However, official police reports make no mention of a campfire, which makes an accidental death or suicide due to falling into a fire unlikely. Like, who the fuck is like, I'm going to kill myself and I'm going to jump in a fire? That doesn't really happen. According to the autopsy and toxicology report, high levels of barbiturates were found in the Isdal woman's system. The most likely source of this was phenamyl tablets, a brand of sleeping pills, some of which were still undigested. According to the experts, she had taken around 50 to 70 pills in 3 doses. The first dose a few hours before death, the last 12 tablets, probably taken shortly before she died, were still in her stomach. The toxicology report found that the concentration in her blood was high enough to make her drowsy, but not enough for her to fall unconscious and nowhere near lethal. Yeah, that kind of seems a little terrifying. Don't eat 50 to 70 sleeping pills for God's sake. Definitely sounds like enough to kill you. The report also mentioned that the pills were pink. Phenamyl tablets sold in Norway were white. Only England sold a pink variety. Unfortunately, the medical examiner's report couldn't confirm whether she had taken the pills by choice or by force. A second finding from the autopsy paints a more horrific picture. Soot particles found in her respiratory tract indicated that she was still alive when she burned. The final cause of death was determined to be monoxide poisoning from the fire. In the tablets, the final dose, once dissolved, would have been enough to kill her when the active ingredient was absorbed into her bloodstream. Okay, so it is enough to kill her, or what? They can't have it both ways. The autopsy further revealed that the Isdal Jane Doe wasn't pregnant and had never had children. A bruise on her neck also suggested that she might have received a blow or perhaps taken a fall. Other than that, and the fact that she was dead, she was in perfect health, the autopsy findings don't prove murder, but it does raise some questions. If she had taken sleeping pills, she would have been drowsy. So how did she get all the way up a mountain by herself? Isdal Valley was a long way to go. Did the pills take too long to take effect, so she put herself on the fire? Or did she make a campfire, which didn't make it into the police report, fell into the fire while under the influence of sleeping pills? See, that seems much more reasonable than just jumping in the fire. If she set herself on fire, she would have needed an accelerant. According to forensic investigator Tormod Bones, traces of petrol were found on the ground beneath her body, but none of the containers found at the scene contained any traces of petrol. That sounds like someone took some petrol there, set her on fire, and took away the can. Because who's taking away the can? Someone else had to have been there. A Swiss forensic psychiatrist, we're just going to stick with Frank, studied the case, also concluded that suicide was unlikely. The traces of petrol further support this, that petrol had to get up the mountain in a container of some kind, and someone took that container with them. And they left the body behind. Whether she took the pills voluntarily or not, someone set her on fire before the pills killed her. Was the killer or killers trying to obscure her identity? If that was their intention, they needn't have bothered. As investigators were about to find out, the Isdal woman had done a very good job of making sure that her true identity would never be found. Either she did that, or the person who killed her did. I mean, cutting the tags out of the clothes is a bit weird, but maybe. Theorizing so far, I'm literally just pulling something out of my ass is like, okay, some random person wants to kill this person. It is Isdal. So they get them to take all their clothes and put on the clothes where the tags have been removed so there's nothing identifiable on the clothes. Then they get them to eat the sleeping pills to become compliant, and then they take them up into the mountains. They set them on fire, and they die. And then the person leaves. That's where I'm at so far. I know it's just kind of like a wild-ass speculation, but it's all I got so far. Early on in the investigation, a discovery was made that should have solved the case. 2 suitcases were found in a locker at a train station in Bergen. The rental period on the locker had expired. When the officials opened the locker, they found the suitcases inside and called the police. The fingerprints on a pair of glasses matched those of the woman found in the Isdal Valley, so police knew the suitcases belonged to their unknown victim. With 2 suitcases filled with personal effects, identifying the woman should have been a breeze. However, this is Dead Reckoning, not CSI, so the find only added more questions. The suitcases contained clothes, 2 wigs, eczema cream, and a spoon, among other things that you'd expect to find in a suitcase. Ah, yes, things they typically expect to find in a suitcase, but no one's answering spoon. Like the clothes she had been wearing, all the labels have been removed. Well, there goes my theory, because I was like, someone's going to get her dressed in these unmarked clothing, but they wouldn't also fill suitcases with unmarked clothing, would they? The label with her name and the prescribing doctor had been scratched off the eczema cream, and the police discovered glasses without prescription lenses, just clear glass. A sewing kit with the logo of the Hotel Regina in Geneva, one of the best hotels in Switzerland at the time, suggested that Our Lady had traveled outside of Norway, which was further confirmed by the presence of Swiss francs. This is very spyish. She's got like random glasses with a clear glass. Like, that sounds like a disguise, doesn't it? However, notably missing from the suitcase was any form of identification. Not a single passport, letter, or note scribbled on a piece of paper gave any clue as to who the woman was. The Bergen police created a sketch, which they circulated to all the hotels in Norway to figure out where our mystery woman stayed. After all, if she had booked into a hotel, all of her details would be on the check-in form. Yeah, because that's impossible to rely on those. As it turns out, Our Lady was memorable, and the police got several hits. They didn't get a name, though. They got 7 exactly. The Isdal woman had checked into multiple hotels using different identities. Handwriting experts analyzed the hotel registration cards and agreed that the names were different, but it was definitely the same person who filled in the cards. If we assume that 1 or 2 hotel clerks turned a blind eye for a little bit of cash, she would have still needed at least 4 or 5 different passports. Because you gotta give. You don't always have to give ID when you well, you kind of do, don't you? Like most places, especially bigger places, they're definitely going to be like, yeah, I need some ID. You need to take a scan of your passport. According to the hotel cards, she was an antique dealer visiting for business reasons. The only consistency in her hotel registration cards is a country of origin, Belgium. However, police couldn't match any of her identities with a missing person in Belgium, suggesting that all of these identities were false. Waitresses, hotel staff, taxi drivers were interviewed, and many of the witnesses who interacted with her remembered her very clearly. She was described as being in her late 20s to mid-30s, with brown eyes and medium-length brown hair, small in stature but elegant, self-assured, and wearing fashionable clothes, suggesting she had money. Some even described her as exotic because of her dark hair and dark complexion, which really stood out in Norway in 1970, when everyone else was the color of fresh snow. She was quiet and observant, not really engaging with those around her, and when she smiled, she had a noticeable gap between her upper front teeth. Hotel registration cards were completed in German, and she spoke very poor English. She wore a lot of makeup, and those who met her described a strong scent that could have been spices or strong perfume. Tone Spanos, who worked the front desk at one of the hotels the women visited back in 1970, mentioned that the woman was wearing a worn-out fur hat when she arrived. She remembered it because it was a style she had never seen before. Many years later, when asked about the woman again, she added that she had since realized that it was similar hats to worn in Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, both Soviet states in the 70s. She also noticed that the woman spoke with a lisp. For someone who's supposed to be a spy, she does sound like she stands out a lot, which is generally not something you want to stand. You don't want to stand out as a spy. You just want to be generic and fit in. One of the suitcases also contained a plastic bag, which led police to a shoe store in, don't butcher this name, but Stavanger. Using the sketch, the assistant recognized the unknown woman as a customer that had bought a pair of boots from him around 2 weeks before. He described her as well-dressed and nice-looking with dark hair. She stood out in his memory because she took a very long time to choose her boots. In fact, she only came back to buy them the next day. He was confident she wasn't Norwegian. She spoke broken English, asked a lot of questions, and took a lot of time to make up her mind. He also mentioned a strong, unpleasant scent that could have been garlic. Police believe that these were the same boots she was wearing when she died. The last important clue found in the suitcases was a notepad with messages written in code, made up of a combination of capital letters and numbers. I'm sorry, but no. Like, if you've got a code, like decoding thing, notes and code in your bag, this is just some spy, for sure. The notepad was sent to an expert codebreaker who managed to break the codes in about 3 seconds flat. Okay, maybe not a spy. If she is a spy, a terrible spy. What looked to be a complex code turned out to be a travel itinerary, probably written in her own shorthand. For example, 23M to 23MO meant March 20th to March 23rd, Oslo. Armed with the hits off the police sketch and the now decoded itinerary, the police were able to trace the woman's movements around Norway. From the 21st to the 24th of March 1970, she checked into the Viking Hotel in Oslo under the name of Genevieve Lenoria. From the 24th to the 25th of March 1970, she stayed at the Hotel Bristol in Bergen under the name Claudia from Brussels. On March 25th, she changed hotels again, moving into the Hotel Scandia in Bergen, where she checked in again as Claudia and stayed until April 1st. On April 1st, she left Norway. Some of the investigators and the children of investigators who worked the case 50 years ago believe the Norwegian intelligence service was behind this. The Isdal woman returned to Norway after 7 months. However, matching a single letter to a city in Greater Europe is a near impossible task. So her exact movements for those 7 months are still unknown. At the end of October, our mystery lady returned to Norway after a stay in 2 different hotels in Paris, where she checked in as Vera Schlossennick. She checked in the K&A Hotel in Stavanger from October 29th to the 30th, under the name Claudia Nielsen from Ghent. On October 30th, she returned to Bergen, checking into the Neptune Hotel under the name Alexia Zarna Merkez, and stayed until November 5th. From Bergen, she traveled to Trondheim, where she checked into the Hotel Bristol as Vera Jarl from Antwerp, and stayed from the 6th to the 8th of November, only to return to Stavanger again on November 9th and checked into the St. Civitan Hotel under the name Fenella Lorch. She stayed until November 18th, making this her longest stay in one place. Perhaps she needed a holiday after all her traveling. But it's unclear what she was doing in Stavanger for 9 days. Like, no one moves around this often. This is gotta be some kind of spy, for sure, right? After this extended stay, she once again traveled to Bergen, checked into the Rosenkrantz Hotel under the name Elizabeth for November 18th to November 19th. Finally, she moved to the Horneheimen Hotel in Bergen, checking in as Elizabeth Lienhauer again. She left the Hornheim on the 23rd of November, and not long after, on the 29th, she was discovered burned to death in the Isdal Valley. Where she was for the 6 days after she was last seen and the discovery of her body, we'll probably never know. Had she been kidnapped and held hostage by those who eventually killed her, or had she gone into hiding only to be discovered by someone meaning her grievous harm? The police investigation was thorough, with the lead investigator, Oscar, announced that the case was closed on December 22nd, 1970. After just 3 weeks of investigation, before the results from the autopsy and toxicology report even available, it seemed like the death was ruled a suicide or accident, and investigation ceased. The fact that this came out like they reached the conclusion even before the autopsy just reeks of a cover-up. Excuse me. For a long time, no progress was made, but this changed in 2016. NRK, the Norwegian public television broadcaster, along with the BBC, investigated the case using modern scientific advances such as DNA analysis, which wasn't available in the 70s. Their search culminated in an award-winning podcast, Death in Ice Valley, presented by Neil McCarthy and Marit Hegroff, and the Norwegian police officially reopened the case. Well, look at that, the power of podcasts. Hegroff had spent years re-interviewing witnesses, tracking down evidence that was considered lost, and studying unsealed files related to the case. Her search also uncovered a few witnesses and stories that hadn't been told before. To my knowledge, her search continues, and hopefully she'll be able to give the Isdal woman back her name, and maybe even send her home. Initially, it was assumed that the last time the Isdal woman was seen alive was at the Horneheimen Hotel in Bergen, where she ordered a cab, presumably to take her to the train station, where her suitcases were later discovered. The last entry in her coded itinerary reads ML23 MMM. This most likely refers to the 23rd of November, when she was last seen alive. 6 days later, her body was found in the Isdal Valley. The entry has never been decoded, so we have no idea what the ML and MMM refer to. However, after the podcast aired, Hegroff, apologies because I'm probably butchering her name, was contacted by a man who could very well be the last person who saw the Isdal woman alive, and he had an interesting story to tell. I'm going to butcher their names, so I'm just going to do it by initials. Back in 1970, KS was a sea captain who lived in Bergen. While hiking Mount Floyen in the Isdal Valley, he was surprised to come across a small party of 3 people, which was uncommon at that time of year. The woman who matched the description of the Isdal woman was hiking in front with 2 men following behind. None of them were dressed for hiking. They were dressed for going into the town. The woman, especially, was too lightly dressed for that time of year. When he passed her, he got a good look at her face. He described the woman as looking scared and like she was giving up. She looked at him and he thought she started to say something, but changed her mind. The men following her were around 20 meters behind, and he described their faces as dead and wooden. They had dark hair and browner skin than what was common in Norway, and he thought they could be from southern Europe. He got the impression that the men were definitely following the woman, and that she knew they were there, but he wasn't sure if the group was actually together. The whole encounter just struck him as very odd. Well, when learning about the woman found dead in Isdal Valley, he was initially hesitant to contact the police, thinking they might believe he was a crazy man telling a crazy story. Hegroff didn't consider the story to be crazy, and neither do I. But there's a problem. The Isdal woman was found on a Sunday morning, and her last reported sighting was on the Monday, almost a week before. However, Kay insisted that he came across the strange party on a Sunday afternoon. He couldn't remember the exact date of the sighting, making it even harder to verify. This all happened 50 years ago, and so it's possible that he actually met them on a Saturday afternoon, or that he met them on a different Sunday. He was just very surprised to see them. So perhaps they didn't expect to meet anyone up there either, and went back down the mountain, only to return for their dastardly deed on a different Sunday. If the last entry in a recorded itinerary referred to November the 23rd, perhaps ML and MMM are the initials of people she planned to meet. Were they the two men following the woman that Kay came across while hiking in 1970? And were they responsible for her death? A big guess? Yes, they are. These two were not the only men she had been spotted with. Usually when a woman is murdered, the first person the police look to is the romantic partner, to rule out domestic abuse or jealousy as a motive for murder. However, despite being seen with multiple men by witnesses, no partner or friend ever came forward to identify that woman. Hegroff re-interviewed witnesses, trying to figure out anything about our mysterious lady and the men she had been seen with. Some of these reports were given to the police 50 years ago, but for some reason, it appears they never followed up on any of these clues. One interesting meeting with an unknown man was found in the files of the secret police, who, after years of denying any involvement with the case, finally admitted that there was in fact a file in the Isdal woman. The document, dated December 22nd, 1970, tells the tale of a fisherman in Tanager, a coastal town in Norway. Bjorn Riort claimed to have seen a woman fitting the description of the Isdal woman close to his home. At the time, the Norwegian Defense Force was testing their new Penguin missile system. He claimed that he saw the woman watching the tests on several different occasions, but couldn't provide exact dates and times. He thought she was Slavic, Russian, or perhaps even Romanian. Even more interesting, he saw her speaking to other naval officers, presumably Norwegian, one on one of the motor torpedo boats. In the 70s, the area wasn't exactly a tourist hotspot, and the woman's presence there during the missile testing is definitely noteworthy. We'll never know exactly what the Isdal woman was doing there, but we do know that the naval officer she was seen talking with never came forward to identify her or help solve the mystery of her death. Because my belief, still, right now, is she was a spy, so of course they're gonna keep quiet. After the podcast, Hegroff was contacted by Sverre Rort, the son of Bjorn Rort, who had an interesting story to add to the mystery. Shortly after reporting this sighting to the police, the Rort family was on their way to London for the Christmas holidays. While staying at the Stavanger railway station, the family was approached by two police officers who took his father aside and spoke to him for about 15 to 20 minutes. The father, being a man of few words, didn't say anything to his family about what the police wanted, and his family continued on their trip to London. Sometime later, Sverre learned that the police officers had given his father a knife and a handgun for protection. Spear believes that his father was told to keep his mouth shut about what he had seen. But Mr. O'Rourke, the elder, had no idea who was behind it, or if he did, he kept it to himself. Spear also got the impression that many years after reporting the sighting and the mysterious visit from the cops, someone disguised as the O'Rourkes, his father, was still looking over his shoulder. An interesting side note to this story, to me anyway, is that the fisherman made it all the way to London and back carrying a gun and knife. Yeah, it's different times though, isn't it? Clearly border checks weren't as strict back then as they are now. This would explain how the Isdal woman was able to move across borders so easily using multiple fake passports. Yeah, this stuff was much easier in the past, right? Because like 70s, you got a fake passport. If that looks real to a dude at customs or border patrol or whatever, he's going to be like, great, move along. Whereas now they take that passport, they look at you, scan into a system. I'm assuming the system is checking whether it's a real passport or not, and whether it matches the name and face on the passport, right? I feel like, that sort of thing was easier to get away with in the past. Nowadays, it's like, computer says no. Another meeting was witnessed by Lillian Mayland, a waitress at the Neptune Hotel in Bergen, who saw the Isdal woman in the company of an as yet unidentified man. She described the Isdal woman as very serious, with sad eyes. One evening, she was serving the woman dinner and found her in the company of a man. They sat together, so they clearly knew each other, but they rarely spoke, and when they did, they spoke in German. It looked like a meeting, as the man was reading something written on a sheet of paper, perhaps a report or an article. The man had gray hair, and the waitress thought he was probably Norwegian. Malin claimed that she told the police about this meeting back in 1970, but there's no mention of this dinner in the police reports. It's a cover-up. The Isdal woman was also seen in a home furnishing shop in Bergen in 1970 by Siri Rodlin, a young clerk at the time. She was with a man, and they were shopping for a mirror, as you do. They took their time and weren't particularly friendly to each other. After a lot of discussion, which could have been arguing, they finally chose a cheap, medium-sized mirror. The clerk couldn't tell what language they were speaking, but was fairly sure it wasn't English, German, or Italian. The woman had curly hair, a description that fit one of the wigs found in her luggage, and dark eyes. Based on appearance, she thought the couple were Eastern European. Usually, shopping for a mirror wouldn't be that strange. However, if you're living in a hotel, why would you be shopping for a mirror to hang on your wall? Finally, the Isdal woman was seen at the Rosenkrantz Hotel in Bergen with another unknown man. A maid reported to the police that she went into the room that evening to prepare the bed, as was customary at the time. She was surprised to find the woman sitting on the bed with a man sitting on a small couch beside the bed. The woman got up to allow the maid to do her job, and the maid, in a hurry, did it as fast as she could. During the whole time she was in the room, neither the man nor the woman spoke a word. She described the man as around 25 to 30 years old, tall, well built, with broad shoulders, blonde hair, and a nice face, dressed in a gray-colored suit. The Isdal woman only stayed at the hotel for one night. The next day, after the visit from the mystery man, she left and moved across the harbor to the Hortaheimen Hotel. Was she running from someone? Once again, it seems like the police didn't make much effort to find this man. In the 50 years since the body of the woman was found, no one has come forward to identify her, despite the fact that multiple eyewitnesses reported seeing her in the presence of men. Whoever these men were, they were determined to keep their connections to the woman's secret, and it seems they succeeded. Clearly, eyewitness accounts are about as useful as the suitcases. In other words, not very. So Hegeroff turned her attention to something that wasn't available in 1970: DNA. Despite having seven different identities, none of which could be confirmed in Belgium, multiple eyewitnesses, personal belongings, and a crime scene to work with, the police were never able to identify her during the initial investigation back in the 70s. The concept of DNA was floating around back then, but it wasn't used to solve a crime until 1986. However, before we get to the DNA, let's review what we already know about the Isdal woman. That can be useful in determining where she came from, which might bring us one step closer to figuring out who she really was. Our mystery woman claimed to be from Belgium, but all the hotel registration forms were filled out in German. Many witnesses also reported that she spoke German. However, based on some language errors, it's been speculated that German wasn't her first language. She might have been using German as another way of hiding her true identity. As an experienced language teacher and editor, a friend of mine has met several language speakers with atrocious grammar who couldn't spell if their lives depended on it. So I'm not convinced this proves anything. In fact, according to one article, she listed the Brussels district office as a passport issuing authority. Apparently, this expression was only used during the Nazi occupation, suggesting that German was in fact her first language. In more recent years, a handwriting expert also joined the search for the unknown woman's identity and took a look at the hotel registration forms, hoping to learn something about the elusive woman from her handwriting. Based on this analysis, the expert concluded that our woman probably received a primary education in France or a French-speaking part of either Belgium or Switzerland. The expert spotted some idiosyncrasies such as the double strokes used for the lowercase t that was commonly used in France at the time, and the underlying of the signature. French speakers typically underline their signature from the initial of their first name. Of course, this is not conclusive, but if she was a first language French speaker trying to hide her identity, it might explain the language mistakes. Yeah, I think that's fine. Like, people make language mistakes in their first language, but I feel people I come across someone and it's like, is English their first language? Almost always I'll be like, yes, it is, or no, it's not. There's very few times in my life where someone has been like, oh no, I actually speak this language better. English is my first language. And you're just like, what the? I think it's happened twice in my whole life when you've been like, wait, English isn't your first language? How the fuck do you speak it so well? When the investigation was reopened in 2016, authorities hoped that DNA might finally provide an answer. In 1970, despite not having access to DNA testing, it was standard practice to keep issuing samples from an autopsy. Thankfully, these samples were stored properly and were still usable after 50 years, and they provided complete DNA profile of the Isdal woman. Using a mitochondrial DNA profile, the DNA that connects us with our ancestors on our mother's side, forensic expert Professor Walter Parson determined that the Isdal woman was definitely of European descent. With a DNA profile in hand, police rechecked all their databases and even sent the new profile to Interpol, hoping for a match. But they came up empty. This leaves the databases of private genealogy labs and companies, like the ones helping people find lost relatives. Unfortunately, there are ethical and legal issues in Norway regarding the use of these private databases in the course of a criminal investigation. Since not everyone who hands over their DNA to these private companies has anything to do with criminal activity, authorities are very limited in what they can access. Much like the Isdal woman herself, her teeth were distinctive. She had 14 fillings and several golden crowns. This was odd considering her age. She was supposedly in her late 20s to mid-30s. It also wasn't typical of the dental work done in Norway at the time. Gold work was more commonly done in Germany and Austria, and frequently seen in Eastern Europe. Carbon-14 testing was also done at the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm in order to determine the woman's age. By matching the level of carbon-14 in the atmosphere with the carbon-14 in the dental enamel, scientists can get a fairly accurate estimate of when someone was born. Based on the hotel registration cards and witness reports, the woman was probably born in the 40s. The cards usually indicated 42, 43. However, the results of the carbon-14 test revealed something unexpected. The woman was around 45 when she died, meaning she was born in the 30s or even the 20s. Wow, she must have looked pretty good for her age. Carbon-14 testing on teeth is apparently very accurate, according to the experts, and people are very bad at judging ages. However, I find it unlikely that all the witnesses would mistake a 45-year-old woman for a woman in her late 20s or early 30s, no matter how much makeup she was wearing. But I mean, some people just look young. They really do. It's clear from this test, even if the dates are a little off, that the Isdal woman was lying about her age, pretending to be younger than she actually was. And that makes sense. In the 70s, a woman in her 40s was expected to be married with children. A woman traveling alone was already a rare sight. A married woman traveling without her kids and husband would have raised even more eyebrows. It's possible she was pretending to be a younger in order for her status as a single woman traveling alone to be more acceptable. The Norwegian Criminal Investigation Service, along with the University of Bergen, also conducted isotope analysis on the teeth. Traces of chemical in the ground and water are deposited in the teeth as they're being formed. By analyzing these chemical signatures, scientists can determine what area a person might originally have hailed from. Based on the isotope analysis, Our Lady was most likely born in southeastern Germany around Nuremberg. The analysis also shows that she probably moved around a lot in her youth. Areas she could have lived in include northern Wales, western Germany, Belgium, and parts of France. She's getting around. She spoke German and probably learned to write in a French region, so her most likely place of residence in her teens would be the French-German border of the Luxembourg-Belgium area. Historically speaking, the late 20s and early 30s in Nuremberg was a significant place to be. It was the spiritual heart of Nazi Germany and fully supported with great enthusiasm the rise of Hitler and the infamous Nuremberg rallies. The pre-war and war years saw a lot of population movement around Europe, especially in Germany. We have no way of knowing whether Isdal woman's movements as a child had anything to do with the war, but living in Nuremberg would have given the Isdal woman and her family a front row seat to the rise of Hitler. Many Jewish families saw the writing on the wall and left Nuremberg at the first opportunity. It's possible that Isdal woman and her family were among those refugees. Her broken English and dental work suggested that she wasn't one of the 10,000 children who escaped Germany for northern Wales through the Kinder transport after November 9th, 1938. However, many families, both Jewish and non-Jewish, sent their children to family and friends living westward, toward Belgium and the border between France and Germany. The isotope testing and handwriting analysis certainly supported this theory that the Isdal woman was sent west as a child. While doing research for the podcast, Hegriff and McCarthy came across the Maria Rosenberg School, and of course, apologies for butchering their names again, but I will link the podcast in the description. I couldn't find any records for the school, but I don't have access to German school records, so I have to rely on their research. Apparently, the school housed young women and girls without families. According to one historical expert, the school was also used for children with behavioral problems, many of them from Nuremberg. But to his knowledge, no Jewish children were hidden at the school during the war. But by looking at student records for the school, a familiar name popped up: Claudia Tielt, one of the names used by the Isdal woman. The records were incomplete, so there's no way of following up on this lead, but it's certainly curious. The refugee, orphan, or child alienated from their family due to behavior problems would make an ideal candidate for any clandestine operation, be it espionage or criminal enterprise. The police followed up on all the names the Isdal woman used, and they never found anything. By the time World War II ended, people had gone missing, families were separated, stuck on the wrong side of the Berlin Wall, and records had been destroyed in bombing raids. If our woman had gone missing in Germany or Belgium during or even right after the war, there's a good chance that her case simply fell through the cracks. There was no one left to miss her and follow up with the police. It was like she never even existed. Messages written in code, wigs, multiple identities, no history. Our Lady was a spy, right? If we consider the Isdal woman's movements in her final hours, This certainly seems like a very good possibility. According to lead investigator Oscar, there was no indication that the victim was involved in any kind of espionage, stating, quote, "Oh, we can rule that out with certainty." And I say, why? Because how can you be so certain? It also sounds like throughout their investigation, they were being leaned on by someone. So that would be very congruent with the idea that they were being leaned on by, well, an intelligence service. However, many people disagree with the nothing to see here conclusion. Starting in the 1960s, Norway, with financial support from the US Navy and West Germany, began developing the Penguin missile system, a short range anti ship missile. The development took around a decade, and the missile was finally put into service in 1972, becoming NATO's first operational naval strike missile. So the project was of great importance to all the players in the Cold War and their spies. I don't understand how this could be like, no, definitely not a spy. Nothing to do with spies. Except everything is saying this is all to do with spies. Investigations into the Isdal women's movements show that her visits to Stavanger and Bergen coincided with tests of the Penguin missile system. Personnel from the Norwegian Defense Research Establishment stayed at hotels in that area during those tests. According to the tale of our fisherman, the Isdal woman was watching the exercises of the 25th Missile Boat Squadron, where she was also seen talking to a naval officer. While none of this proves that she was a spy, her presence is definitely suspicious. And considering the importance of this newly developed weapon system, the Isdal woman being a Soviet spy is certainly within the realm of possibility. Unless I'm missing something. And I know it's like one of those things where it's like, okay, there's no evidence, but oh my God, the amount of circumstantial evidence is crazy. However, the Cold War wasn't the only thing happening to the world in the 70s. In the summer of 1973, a special unit of Mossad assassinated Ahmed Butchiki openly in the street in the town of Lillehammer, a ski resort town in southern Norway. The Mossad agents mistaken Ahmed for Ali Hassan Salameh, a Palestinian man involved in the Munich massacre at the Olympic Games in 1972. The incident opened a whole new can of worms. The Norwegian authorities were very lenient towards the Mossad agents that shot an innocent man in the street, giving them a very short prison sentence. This all happened 3 years after the Isdal woman was found dead, but it suggests that the Mossad was operating in Norway in the 70s. So, if not a Soviet spy, was the woman connected to Mossad in some way? According to Professor Stephen of Huddersfield University, an expert in Western counterintelligence, the Mossad was quite adept at passports and certainly had the capacity to manage an agent with multiple identities. I mean, sure, but so does the Soviet Union. You can bet they can forge passports. Didn't they have like agents literally in the United States pretending to be Americans? Unlike the Soviets, Mossad was more likely to use female spies. If the Norwegian government was so lenient towards foreign secret service agents operating openly in Norway, perhaps the case of the Isdal woman was closed so quickly to hide the movement of intelligence agencies, either foreign or domestic. While the spy theory certainly makes sense to us mere mortals, those with a little more insight into spycraft have a different opinion. According to Ivar Newman, director of Norwegian Social Records, spy operations at the time were set up as follows. As a spy, you had an officer you reported to. Excuse me. In the Soviet days, there would be one person working in the embassy, known as the resident, that would be the ranking intelligence officer. Their job was to maintain relationships and recruit agents. Next in the hierarchy, you'd have the professional or career spies. They, in turn, would have networks of informants passing them information as well as couriers and messengers. Some of these informants would be paid, while others did it for ideological reasons. A proper spy would be provided with a legend, a backstory, which included a full life history with a proper documentation to back it up. A spy would certainly have one or two false identities, but it was unlikely for a spy to have 7 different identities. Keeping that many backstories straight without tripping yourself up would be very difficult, even for a professional spy. I mean, yeah, sure, if you had 7 fully fleshed out backstories, but you could have like 1, 2, or 3 fully fleshed out backstories, which you can keep on top of, and then just have some random names that you use for checking into hotels or booking flights. Then that's as deep as they go. You don't need every identity to be super in depth. You just need some of them to be in depth for more complicated stuff, and then some of them not to be in depth for stuff where no one's ever going to ask questions. No one's going to check you into a hotel and be like, "So, where did you go to university?" No one's asking that. And if you're only using identity for that, then it doesn't need to be deeper. I think it is spies. However, just because she wasn't a spy, potentially, doesn't mean she wasn't involved in espionage. This was the days before super-fast internet and overnight delivery services. The only way for a spy to get important information in the hands of handlers was through couriers. Considering some of the high-profile cities that the Isdal woman visited, Hamburg in Germany, um, Switzerland, Paris, and Rome, it's possible that our woman wasn't a spy but a courier working for an espionage ring operating in Norway. A ring involving some high-ranking Norwegian officials. Perhaps she made a mistake and as a result was killed and put on a fire to hide her identity and cover up the involvement of some very important people with a lot to lose. So she could be a courier, and I totally agree with that, but in my book, that's also being a spy. You're working for an intelligence service, it's pretty spy like. Considering her behavior, I'm inclined to believe that professional spies. I mean, professional spies have an agenda, like, I just don't believe it. It's too spy. Despite all the signs pointing towards espionage or criminal involvement, some have proposed more mundane or tragic explanations. One such theory is that the Isdal woman may have been suffering from mental illness. At first glance, her behavior certainly could suggest some form of paranoia. She changed hotel rooms multiple times, sometimes within the same hotel. She moved furniture around, she removed all labels from her clothes. She carried wigs and filled out forms under false identities, all behavior that could point to delusions, possibly paranoid schizophrenia, or another psychotic disorder. Some theorists have suggested that the barbiturates found in her system may have been taken not to kill herself, to quiet the voices or calm a racing mind. Others note that she appeared frightened and anxious, especially during her last days. Witnesses described her as looking over her shoulder, tense and evasive. If true, could all of this have been the result of a mental health crisis? It's possible, but not convincing. First, there's her level of organization. She kept a detailed itinerary, even if it's coded. She traveled across countries with ease, using well coordinated aliases. She appeared to have money and seemed to operate with purpose. She carried items a person suffering from an unmanaged psychiatric condition might not think to carry: multiple sets of clean clothes, foreign currency, coded notes, and a well organized suitcase. She wasn't wandering aimlessly. Her movements were deliberate. And then there's her death. It was gruesome, controlled. She was found with items laid out ceremonial beside her, no signs of struggle, and a trace of petrol at the scene. Even if you accept the theory that she walked into the mountains to take her own life, it doesn't explain why she would have set herself on fire or how, nor does it explain why the canister of petrol used to ignite the fire was missing. Even the barbiturates in her system, estimated at 50 to 7 pills, weren't enough to kill her immediately. And she was still alive when she burned. The evidence shows she inhaled smoke, meaning her body didn't just happen to land in a fire, she was burning while conscious. Would a woman with mental illness have the ability or the will to orchestrate such a slow and excruciating death? It seems unlikely. Then there's the serial killer theory. Some armchair detectives have suggested the Isdal woman might have been the victim of an unknown murderer, possibly a serial killer preying on women. Norway has had a few serial killers over the year, but none that matched this particular style, and none known to have operated in 1970 Bergen. Others have proposed an odd twist, that perhaps there wasn't one woman, but two. Could it be that some of the sightings attributed to the Isdal woman were actually mistaken identity? Sightings of another woman staying in the same cities at the same time? It's worth noting that the Norwegian police were reportedly looking for an American woman with a similar appearance around the same period. Could the two have been confused? Maybe some of the sightings, the shopping, the men, the mirror, the unusual conversations, didn't involve the Isdal woman at all. Maybe. So why was she forgotten? The Isdal woman had no family that came forward. No friends reported her missing. No colleagues questioned her absence. Who was she? Was she alone in the world that not a single person noticed she had vanished? Or did people know and were they warned to stay silent? Some believe the investigation was deliberately suppressed. The case was closed before the autopsy results even came back. Norwegian authorities were allegedly blocked from following up leads in Paris and Geneva. Witnesses who reported unusual sightings were never followed up with. Important documents and photos were misplaced or lost. And the few who might have known her, the men seen with her, the officer in Tanager, the hotel companions, all remained silent. What were they afraid of? Whoever she was, the Isdal woman wasn't just a cipher in someone else's story. She had a life, and possibly many lives. She traveled, she spoke multiple languages, she had a sense of style, she wrote in code, she stayed alone, and she died alone. Her grave in Mollendal Cemetery is marked now by flowers and tributes from those who didn't know her, but who want her to be known. On the headstone, there's no name, just the date, 1970. She remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in Norwegian history, and one of the most compelling cold cases in modern Europe. Maybe someday, with a match in a DNA database, or a document uncovered in an archive, or a confession long buried in someone's memory, the Isdal woman will be giving her back her name. Until then, all we have are the facts, the theories, and the flame that refuse to fully erase her. And that is the story of the Isdal woman. Let me know your thoughts and theories on the Isdal woman in the comment section below. As always, give us a thumbs up if you like our video. Hit that subscribe button down below. Hit the bell notification button to be notified of future videos. And if you want to support the channel, you can scan the QR code or buy some coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Larry M. Lease. That's LARRYMLEASE. Or just use the link in the description. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time.